You already know Meghan is not coming to London. Everyone knows that by now. It has been the story of the week, repeated across every royal outlet that covers this family. What almost nobody is talking about is the one sentence reportedly coming from inside the palace this week that has people wondering whether this family is now genuinely beyond repair.
Breaking news, insiders. It has been announced that Meghan, Lily and Archie will not join Prince Harry when he is in London next week.
I am going to get to that sentence before this video ends, and I think when you hear it, it is going to reframe everything else in this story. But first, stay with me, because there is a security request buried in the reporting around this trip that is stranger than almost anything else that has come out of Montecito in months, and once you hear the specifics, I think you will understand exactly why William's side reportedly drew such an unusually hard line this time. Let's start with what we actually know happened, because the surface version of this story is simple, even though what sits underneath it is not. Meghan is staying home. Archie and Lilibet are staying home. Harry makes the trip alone, as he has been making these trips alone for a while now.
I believe Meghan is trying to break him. She believes if she's a widow before William is king, she'll have the title of Princess Henry forever. It's this kind of stinking thinking that makes her so dangerous.
And there is one detail from before the official announcement that caught people's attention in a way the announcement itself did not. According to a source who reportedly saw the family in Portugal shortly before everything was confirmed, there were no visible signs of packing for a genuinely long visit. Not the suitcases stacked by the door, not the preparation you would expect from a family gearing up to cross the Atlantic and spend real extended time in Britain with a specific itinerary. It looked, by this particular account, more like a short European holiday than the actual beginning of a homecoming, which raises an uncomfortable possibility that some royal watchers have already started voicing openly. The London trip, exactly as it was presented to the public for weeks, may never have been quite as fully locked in as the headlines suggested. Here is the part that makes this genuinely painful, rather than just another round of scheduling drama and palace logistics.
Chums, did anybody absolutely believe that this could have possibly have happened other than Harry?
In Britain right now is a father and a king managing cancer treatment, a man with reportedly limited time left with grandchildren he barely knows and has seen only a handful of times in their entire lives. For weeks, there was real public hope circulating that a visit might finally actually happen this time. And then, as the concrete plans slowly came into focus, that hope quietly evaporated again, the same way it has evaporated more than once before over the past several years. If you have ever waited for a call from someone you love that never came, you already understand exactly what that particular kind of disappointment feels like. And it probably explains why so many people online reacted to this news with something closer to genuine sadness than outright anger.
It's very easy to manipulate a drug addict or an alcoholic, especially if you share some of their habits and practices. It's very easy. Just encourage them on the road to perdition and watch and wait while they destroy themselves.
Now here is where the story gets considerably more complicated, because what reportedly happened behind the scenes was not simply a family quietly making ordinary travel arrangements the way most families do. According to reports citing palace sources, this looked considerably more like a formal negotiation with specific terms, and some of what was reportedly being requested as part of that negotiation surprised even people who follow this family very closely and thought they had seen everything by now. Stay with me, because this is exactly where the story turns. The first request, according to these reports, was that Frogmore Cottage would be the preferred place to stay, with Meghan reportedly feeling it offered the greatest sense of privacy and security available to them in the UK. And if that detail landed strangely for you, you are not alone, because a significant number of people immediately pointed out the obvious contradiction. Is this the same Frogmore Cottage that Harry and Meghan described during the Oprah interview in far less flattering terms? Too small, uncomfortable, a place that came with its own set of serious grievances attached? The property that was practically presented as evidence of how poorly they had been treated is now, apparently, the preferred residence for a return visit.
Calls for Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, to keep Archie and Lily away from Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis at all costs.
Viewers noticed that shift almost instantly, and it did not go unremarked. Then came the second request, and this is the one that really got people talking. Reported access to the royal helicopters. Helicopters. For a couple who have spoken publicly and repeatedly about environmental responsibility, who stepped back from official royal duties specifically to build an independent life outside the institution, who have been openly critical of multiple aspects of their royal experience, a request for helicopter access is the kind of detail that makes people stop and ask whether any of it is internally consistent anymore. Add to that reported hopes for police escorts and motorcade arrangements of the kind typically reserved for senior working royals, and you start to see why this reportedly did not land the way it might have been intended to land. As for how the discussions actually concluded, reports suggest William's side took a genuinely firm position. Meghan would not be staying anywhere on the Windsor estate, not the castle, not the grounds, nowhere. Those reports have never been officially confirmed by the palace, but they became one of the most discussed details of the entire story within days.
Harry and Meghan have been warned that it is over. They have been warned. Did their royal exit brand finally run out of time? I'm going to explain to you, yes, it did. It ran out of time spectacularly.
Try seeing it from William's side for a moment, because a lot of people did exactly that. After the interviews, the memoir, the documentaries, the years of material that has specifically and repeatedly implicated him and his household, plenty of commentators said they understood exactly why firm boundaries might now be non-negotiable. Good on William for saying no became one of the more common reactions online. Others pushed back hard, arguing that shutting out grandchildren over adult disputes crosses a line that should not be crossed regardless of what came before. Public opinion on this split about as cleanly as it always does. If you're finding this breakdown useful, the like button helps this channel reach more people who want the details rather than just the headline. Hit it and stay with me, because the security report is where this story gets genuinely interesting.
He truly believed this apart from Harry, did he? I think he felt, Meghan Markle was no intention really of coming back to the United Kingdom. Now, the story goes, right, chums, that apparently, later on in the week, she might grace us with her presence. And if you remember, this has real echoes of what happened over in Canada,
The security paperwork Harry reportedly cited in support of these various requests has now been reviewed by one of Britain's most respected independent security experts, and his assessment does not exactly support the case being made. Here is something that barely made it into most of the coverage. The security report describing the threats Harry reportedly faces, including specific references to threats connected to the Taliban, was widely reported as having been privately commissioned by Harry himself rather than produced independently by the British government. One former PR professional summarized the obvious problem in one line: "When you want a narrative to work in your favor, you commission your own report." That quote spread quickly, and it captured exactly the skepticism a lot of people were already feeling. UK security specialist Will Geddes reviewed what has been made public and offered an assessment that was considerably more critical than the Sussex framing would suggest. According to Geddes, the identity of the company that actually prepared the report has never been publicly confirmed, and no independent expert has been given the opportunity to examine the complete document. He went further, arguing that the 6 main threat points identified in the report appeared weak by professional standards, that they did not describe anything beyond the kind of security concerns that many high-profile public figures deal with routinely, without needing government-funded armed protection to manage them. Then there is the specific claim, widely reported and repeated by Harry's own team, that all he currently receives when in Britain is a phone number for a police liaison officer. Geddes says that description simply does not match reality. According to him, Harry can actually receive coordination with Protective Command, formal security briefings, support alongside his own private protection team, and, where appropriate, access to high-level intelligence used specifically for security planning purposes. That is, in Geddes' professional assessment, a level of support that is not available to most public figures in Britain, security adjacent or otherwise. Geddes also pointed to an incident that undercuts the crisis framing rather badly. Harry was filmed ringing a doorbell in Fulham in central London, apparently visiting a friend, with no reported security incident, no crowd, no drama. His own team handled the visit quietly and without any apparent difficulty. If the threat level were genuinely what the commissioned report suggests, Geddes argues, that kind of unremarkable, low-profile visit would look very different, with a very different footprint of protection surrounding it. And there is a broader consistency question sitting underneath all of this that is hard to avoid no matter how you feel about Harry personally. This is the same man who has traveled to Ukraine during an active war, voluntarily, without the level of protection he is currently requesting for a visit to his own country. The same man who wrote in his own memoir about the specifics of his military service, including a detailed account of his engagement count during operations against the Taliban, details he chose to publish himself voluntarily for an international audience for the specific commercial purpose of selling books. Several commentators have pointed out how difficult it is to reconcile a security posture built around threats stemming from that service with the fact that the details generating those specific threats were disclosed by Harry himself in a best-selling memoir entirely of his own choosing. Here is the sentence I promised you at the start, the one reportedly circulating from inside the palace that has people genuinely wondering whether this family has moved past the point of no return. According to a source close to the situation, when Harry's various requests around the trip were being discussed internally, one palace figure reportedly summarized the mood in a single line. This whole business has become incredibly tiresome. Not angry, not devastated, tiresome. That word, if the report is accurate, tells you more about where this family actually stands than any of the individual disputes over Frogmore or helicopters ever could. Because tiresome is not the language of a wound that is still raw. It is the language of an institution that has simply stopped being surprised, stopped being hurt, and started treating each new development as an administrative inconvenience to be managed rather than a family crisis to be resolved. That is the sentence I promised you at the very beginning. And once you have actually heard it in full context, I think it recontextualizes everything else we have covered in this story. The Frogmore contradiction, the helicopters, the Windsor estate refusal, the missing invitation to Peter Phillips's wedding, William's friend saying Harry's name simply does not come up anymore. None of those individual things, taken on their own, read as particularly devastating. Together, with tiresome sitting underneath all of them as the operative word from inside the palace, they add up to something considerably colder than anger. They add up to an institution that has moved on, whether or not Harry has. That institutional word, tiresome, is exactly the frame Tina Brown, the former Vanity Fair editor who knew Diana personally, was reaching for this week when she offered her own assessment, and it landed with real weight because of who was saying it. Tina Brown, someone who has historically been read as sympathetic toward Harry and Meghan rather than hostile, gave an assessment that immediately generated fresh debate. In her view, the conflict inside this family has moved past open anger entirely and settled into something colder and more permanent. What she specifically described as a Cold War. Not a fight anymore, a standoff, a situation where neither side is actively attacking the other because neither side expects anything to change. That framing lines up uncomfortably well with something else that happened this month. Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son and Harry's own cousin, got married. This was not a distant relative. Peter was there for Harry during one of the very darkest periods of his life, in the immediate aftermath of Diana's death. And that bond has been remembered by people who know this family for decades. Reports indicate Harry was not invited. For a lot of royal watchers, that detail landed harder than almost anything else this year, because it suggested the estrangement has moved well past the institutional level and into personal relationships that have nothing to do with titles or duties at all. And then there is the detail that Tina Brown's Cold War framing explains better than anything else could. According to an old friend of William's, feelings of frustration and betrayal used to come up constantly whenever the two of them talked, but in a recent conversation, this friend says Harry's name did not come up at all, not once. To some observers, that silence is not a sign the anger has faded. It is a sign that something has replaced the anger entirely, the quiet, settled distance of two people who have stopped expecting anything from each other. If you have lived long enough, you already know that the real turning point in a relationship is rarely the shouting. It is the silence that comes after, when there is nothing left worth arguing about. And that, according to people who are actually close to Harry, rather than simply commenting from the outside, is exactly the tragedy sitting underneath all of this noise. He reportedly misses his father deeply, and he reportedly misses William most of all, the only other person alive who understands, from the inside, exactly what it meant to grow up as Diana's son. Tina Brown's own summary of where that leaves things came down to two words: too late. Royal biographer Angela Levin has offered a different but related explanation for why William specifically continues to hold the line, and it centers on his own children. According to Levin, Harry reportedly expressed a wish to play some kind of supportive role in Charlotte and Louis's lives specifically. His reasoning being that because George is the future king, Charlotte and Louis might face a different and less discussed set of pressures that Harry feels. From his own experience as the spare rather than the heir, he understands better than most. On its face, that could read as a genuine offer, one sibling trying to pass on hard-won understanding to nieces and nephews. But according to Levin, William and Catherine reportedly had no interest in the idea whatsoever, and a great many people online said they found the very suggestion surprising given everything Harry has written publicly about the monarchy's effect on younger royals. Some critics have been blunt about it. "He should keep their names out of his mouth," was one comment that circulated widely. Others have argued that if the two branches of the family ever do spend real time together again, clear boundaries between all 5 children, George, Charlotte, Louis, Archie, and Lilibet, would need to be established from the outset, not for the children's sake specifically, but because of how quickly anything involving them becomes public content given the family's history with books, documentaries, and interviews. To be clear, nobody serious is blaming the children for any of this. Archie, Lilibet, George, Charlotte, and Louis are innocent by any reasonable standard, and most people commenting on this story go out of their way to say so. The concern being expressed is entirely about the adults and how future interactions might play out, not about the kids themselves. There is also real sympathy circulating for Archie and Lilibet specifically, given how limited their relationships with extended family and cousins on both sides have reportedly been. Even Thomas Markle has said publicly that he has never met his own grandchildren, a detail that a lot of people find quietly devastating regardless of where they stand on the broader Sussex story. Now, the timing of all of this deserves its own moment, because it is not neutral. The reported travel window for this visit fell close to what would have been Princess Diana's 65th birthday. For anyone who remembers her, the wedding, the public life, the tragedy in Paris, that date still carries enormous emotional weight decades later. According to one reported source, speculation quickly turned to whether the timing was coincidental at all, with one theory suggesting a possible reconnection with Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, and perhaps even a visit to Althorp, the Spencer family estate where Diana is buried. Those ideas remain entirely unconfirmed, but they generated real anger online almost immediately. One commenter's reaction was blunt: "They're going to merge her grave." That sentiment, harsh as it is, was echoed by a lot of other people who have watched how thoroughly commercialized nearly every aspect of the Sussex operation has become. But people who actually know how Charles Spencer operates point to a very different picture. He has been fiercely protective of Diana's memory and his family's privacy for decades, and Althorp has always functioned as a place of quiet remembrance rather than public spectacle. A highly publicized visit timed for maximum press coverage does not fit anything Spencer has done in the past. That same week, on the other side of this story entirely, Catherine kept a notably low profile while completing a charity mountain challenge, then made a surprise, completely unannounced appearance at Wimbledon, greeting fans, handing out tickets to people who had queued overnight, chatting easily with the crowd. No special requests reported, no helicopters, no controversy. Just an appearance at an event, quietly, the way these things used to happen before every royal outing became a strategic communications exercise. Which makes what one newspaper published about her that same week considerably more jarring. A Daily Mail columnist wrote a piece arguing that Catherine had made what the writer called a rare mistake in how she handled her own cancer diagnosis, specifically criticizing her decision not to publicly disclose which type of cancer she had been treated for. Sit with that for a second. A woman goes through cancer treatment, supports a cancer charity publicly, returns to her public duties with visible discipline, and the resulting debate in a national newspaper is about whether she owed the public more medical detail than she chose to share. Angela Levin, not someone typically known for sharp or unmeasured public criticism of anyone in this story, responded directly and without hedging in the slightest, calling the column vulgar, rude, and deeply unfair. And it is worth remembering that Catherine's medical privacy had already been seriously compromised once, after reports that hospital staff had attempted to access her private records during treatment, which makes a newspaper column arguing she should have shared more feel considerably worse than it might have otherwise. Cancer survivors flooded the comments with their own experiences. One woman described 6 months of chemotherapy followed by 6 months of radiotherapy and said nobody ever demanded to know her exact diagnosis because she believed, correctly, that it was entirely hers to share or not share. So where does all of this actually leave the Sussexes? Because after the cancelled trip, the reported disagreements over Frogmore and helicopters, the ongoing security dispute, and the widening distance within the family, a lot of people are now asking the same blunt question. What comes next? The Invictus Games sit right in the middle of that question. Some critics have argued that if Harry's security situation keeps generating this much public dispute, eventually someone is going to ask whether his continued presence is actually good for the event itself, or whether stepping back would serve the veterans and the charity better than continuing to fight this particular battle in public. That is opinion circulating in the public debate, not a confirmed plan, but it has real traction. Some supporters, including people identifying themselves as veterans, have already floated the idea online, with a few even mentioning boycotts. And some security analysts believe the current dispute is not really about this one summer trip at all, but about laying groundwork for security arrangements well ahead of the 2027 Games. Then there is the titles question, which keeps resurfacing with more energy each time this story develops. One detail that keeps generating discussion: under current royal conventions, Meghan could reportedly retain her royal styling if she were ever widowed, but not if the marriage ended in divorce. A distinction that a lot of people did not know existed, and that has become its own small pocket of ongoing debate. And underneath every part of this sits King Charles, managing his own cancer treatment, reportedly still hoping for some kind of reconciliation with his younger son before time runs out on the possibility. At the same time, nearly everyone watching this story closely believes the accumulated disputes, Frogmore, the helicopters, the security fight, Peter Phillips, the silence between the brothers, have made that reconciliation considerably harder to reach than it was even a year ago. Here is the lesson a lot of people are taking from this story, and it goes well beyond one royal family. Sometimes, after enough hurt, enough distance, and enough public conflict accumulates, rebuilding trust becomes genuinely difficult. Not impossible, but difficult in a way that requires more from everyone involved than anyone currently seems willing to give. We do not know what happens behind closed doors. Nobody outside that family actually does. But Harry's latest trip to London has generated more open questions than answers, and the silence surrounding what happens next has become its own story. What do you think? Is this Cold War permanent, or is there still a genuine path back for this family before it becomes too late in the way Tina Brown describes? Do you believe the security concerns are genuine? Or is Will Geddes right that something else is driving this entire dispute? And that word from inside the palace, tiresome, does that change how you read everything else in this story? Drop your take in the comments. I read every one of them. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.